Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Henserling, and you are listening to Watch This List Unplugged. This is episode 5 of my comfort film series with a very special guest whom I have been trying to get on my show for a while now, but it's the right time for him to be on. The great Stephen Gillespie, who has his own podcast that he's going to tell you a bit about called The Stacks. Welcome, Stephen. I'm stoked that you're here. Please tell us about all the shenanigans and things that you're involved in.
Shenanigans is the right word. I'm stoked to be here also. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure. So
Yes.
those that may know me from Letterboxd, where I am Stephen or Stephen Gillespie, and I look like Godzilla, which you can see just above me there. So there you go.
Above your head.
Got to keep on brand. You may have heard me on the Stacks podcast with my friend Jack, where we go through all things film, bad movies, good movies, filmographies. Just wrapped up a Jane Campion series, which is a lot of fun. You might see my writing on TwinGeeks.com, and I'm on other podcasts such as I'm Thinking of Spoiling Things, Ranking the Monsters, and Don't Let the Motoring Cast Get You. I think that is it. Occasional guests on other things,
So
but
you're quite prolific, Stephen. Would you say that word to describe yourself?
I'll take it. I just, again, doing lots of things, just doing stuff, keeping busy, just chatting far too much.
Yes.
The plan is to make it so it's harder to avoid me than it is to engage with me. So people just have I'll be in so many places that listeners can't not hear me.
Yes. And you kind of you also are that way with your reviews as well. Like, you pop up on my feed all the time. Like, you are also writing all the time in addition to talking all the time.
I have always loved writing, and as I've said in other places, and I think expressed in reviews, I definitely see the writing process as an extension of the thinking process of, I think best through writing and through talking. So it is the best way for me to really get out what I actually think about a film and to engage with it. So whereas some may sit and really cogitate on what they've watched and sit in silence or talk about it, if I've got something to talk about, fantastic. But I like to jump on a podcast or start writing. And that's my way of kind of just ruminating on things, because I like to get involved with what I've seen in that way and just try and get my thoughts down and go through the rational process.
Do you feel that you, through the act of writing, is that what reveals to you what you actually think, or do you have a pretty sure impression prior to writing and then it comes out?
It depends. Sometimes, I mean, with more complex, more ambiguous stuff, and I don't mean just ambiguous in terms of textually, in terms of sometimes I'm not sure what I think about something, and then you kind of find form in your thoughts, or sometimes you have my favorite writing is when I'm I have a thesis at the heart of it, and it's how can I bend the whole film back to this thesis. So then it's kind of you're working out how the film fits to the one thing that stuck with you. So I thought the film was about this, and then you work out more and more ways as you write about it or talk about it. Sometimes I go with a lot more structure. But, I mean, one of my favourite things to do, though I think scores are very, very silly, is that you kind of have an idea of a score when you're writing a review, and then sometimes you've written it and you go, actually, no. And you write yourselves up a score or down a score, so that can be that one thing. I remember writing about... I forget what Bergman film it was, Wild Strawberries, and being that was great, and then writing about it being that was absolutely outstanding. Really kind of getting the thoughts out there. So writing helps with thinking and really processing a film.
So you will never write something and not know what score that you're giving it. You'd start with a score and then write. But would you ever start writing and then give the score at the end?
I mean, it's a bit of both, really.
And have no idea where you stand.
Yeah, it's either you go in thinking, I think this is a blah, because that helps to guide what I'm going at, and it's me justifying that. Or, I mean, when I was writing more on a blog or on Letterboxd, I just never used scores because I find them irritating. And it was a way of being the words are what matters. And I still stand by that, but scores are very useful for self-cataloguing, and I have noticed from people engaging with stuff, people engage with score first and then go on to read stuff. So helps in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they're also helpful for like at a glance. Like if people can see what you think of it just immediately, they'll decide like, oh, I want to actually read this or not based on. So it's kind of, it works both ways, I think. Like, because you don't want to deter people from reading it by having one, but then you also, I don't know, it's kind of a catcher.
Yeah, it's a weird world of quantifying movies and making them into maths, but one has to apparently.
Yeah. Yes. One must conform in certain ways. Speaking of conformity, actually, we'll go non-conformity with Stephen. I asked him to choose 3 comfort films.
Yeah.
And 2 of them are what I would consider to be popularly accepted or embraced as such.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is most assuredly a unusual choice, and we're going to start with it right out the gate. So Stephen's first one is Society, which is from 1989, directed by Brian Yuzna. Stephen, set this up for us, please. This film.
So a bit closer to the film, then we'll talk about why it's comforting, because it is deeply so. Society, as you mentioned, Brian Yuzna, who is more notable as a producer, I think, of being attached to Stuart Gordon movies. Stuart Gordon movies being more popular. So he's attached to From Beyond and Reanimator. He later went on to do Bride of Reanimator as director of that, but produced the other 2. Stuart Gordon, will also know for Castle Freak. That was another film that I thought about as a comfort film, but did not go for
comfort
because that one is not comforting. It's just an amusing movie. Brian Yuzna is part of the body horror explosion of the late 80s, early 90s, and is one of the main figures in a subgenre of body horror. For those that don't know body horror, it is horror based around imagery of the grotesque, focused on bodies and like it makes it sound deeply uncomforting. Violations of bodies becoming the grotesque object appearance of bodies. Just real slop and goo, really. Think of the end of Akira, but as a genre. And there you go. So, and Yuzna is part of this
good images.
Plastic reality is the phrase I think he attached to it. I think it does stem from him, of this use of practical effects that, if you're a fan of the Godzilla movies like I am, the effects people on those films talk about how when those early Godzilla films came over to the US, they were bastardized and cut up and like rebranded because the US saw them as very kitsch and very, very silly, because they're like, these are models, these are fake. And the Japanese effects artist talked about part of the joy is in knowing that it's fake and seeing the engagement with these like pristine built kind of like masterful creations of the fact that the model is wonderful. It doesn't matter that you know it's a model, it's the appreciation, the detail and the craftsmanship of the model itself. And plastic reality is kind of like that. You don't think it is real, but it is connected to reality, has a weight to it, has a plasticity to it, but then is fake enough to allow joy in destruction. There's that Sontag essay about Godzilla movies, about the aesthetics of destruction, how destruction becomes joyful when it becomes like this idea of like fakery, and what would be repulsive in real life becomes very comforting, not the word yet, but becomes very satisfying on screen. And for me, Yuzna's effects have that appeal of, this is really well done fakery to the point of hyperbole that becomes the entertaining side of violence, as opposed to the more grounded, pain-focused, suffering-focused films, which he does not make. So therefore, when it explodes out into full orgies of violence, it is a creative, expressive, evocative thing by these wonderful, wonderful Screaming Mad George effects, a name that will come up a few times.
Stephen, you are so passionate about. I almost feel like the movie could have really been about anything to a certain extent, because you just revel so much and you find so much joy out of the practical effects aspect of it, that it's almost, the story is pretty secondary, or the other elements of it are not nearly as meaningful to you as that.
Yeah, totally. And that's come for me. But there's also, a underground filmmaker and prolific musician, maybe the most prolific musician of all time, though no one's really heard of him, though you should do, Matt Farley, because he's done like 25 or 30,000 songs or whatever under different monikers. But he makes movies, including The River Beast Get You, Local Legends, Magic Spot last year, which is absolutely fabulous. And we do a podcast about his films. We've had him on the podcast a couple of times. Great guy, really interesting, creative.
Wow.
And there is this... He talked about on an episode we did on Twin Geeks podcast when I was guesting on that, and he chose the movie Friday the 13th Part 2 specifically, and he pitched this idea of he enjoys it because, yes, horror is horrific, but because you can't be horrific all the time, you need peaks and valleys. So much of horror is just like fun, low-stakes hangout movie in a way that's actually really enjoyable, and Society embodies that for me as well, of the thing that people forget about this kind of era of non-psychological, I'm going to get in your brain and break you horror films. It's mostly just very low-stakes character moments that don't really matter. And then you just get some wild explosion at gore at the end. And Society is so good at that for me. If it's just a bunch of teens hanging around doing teeny things. And it's very, very silly. There's only one bit I don't like about the film, and there is the presentation of one character who refers a few times, whose body is used a bit as a joke. That I don't like. The rest of it I find greatly enjoyable.
Yes. So can you give us, like, just for anybody who isn't familiar at all, if you want to kind of sell this, and then we'll end it with you saying like what it means to you on a personal comfort level. Yeah. But how would you pitch this as far as just what the heck the movie is about? I don't want to get like too plot heavy, but just so people have some idea, just a general idea.
Yeah. So Society is a quite legendary body horror movie because of its effects. So if you're interested in that, go into it sight unseen. But the pitch of it, Billy Warlock, great name, is part of an elite wealthy family but feels like he does not belong, feels that he is adopted, etc., and feels that there is something sinister to the wealth around him. And this comes at the end of the 80s. It's very like a political reflection of its time, of the idle wealth, the money class, this growing, burgeoning elite, specifically in American politics, which I don't know much about, as you do, obviously, but I know enough from the casual across the pond observer. He thinks there is something incestuous in his family, which links to this idea of the elite cement themselves by selective approaches, which is its own metaphor for only dealing with themselves being a separate class of people. And he comes to realize that it is much worse than he could ever think, and that the elite are this literally parasitic, monstrous thing who get their power, strength, and influence from subsuming those that they deem to be below them. And they live off of the inherited characteristics of their perceived lowers. So it is a very blunt, in-your-face capitalism metaphor that gets not nuance, but effectiveness from how well and creatively expressed it is.
It's an excellent summer. You know what? Listening to you talk about this movie is such a different experience from the actual movie itself. Like I almost wish that anyone who watches this could have you doing the commentary over it, just to sort of, it's like I'm eating McDonald's right now. Not to say that it's not good, but just this feeling of like you putting McDonald's into 5-star terms. It's not a slide, I swear, on the film itself, but it's just like adding a perspective to something that you could very easily just write off as being totally silly. And not even like giving it a second
silly. Thought. And part of what I like is I think that silly things should be taken seriously for their openly. It doesn't pretend to not be silly at any point, and it is a comedy. It's a comedy film. And there's the Empire review that I think is from the time, or it's at least been updated, that do label it as a teen comedy. And I always love reviews that describe it as comedy film first, as opposed to gross horror film, because the gross horror film element is also part of its comedy. So it fits in a lineage that starts by Sam Raimi of The Evil Dead. Have you seen the early Peter Jackson films?
I have seen Evil Dead and I have seen Brain Dead.
Oh, yeah. So Brain Dead, one of my absolute favorite movies.
Of course it is.
It's just absolutely glorious, of just this sense of, so Peter Jackson calls it splatstick, this idea that the slapstick levels of ridiculous gore. Brain Dead was for a long time legally the bloodiest movie ever made because of the amount of fake blood used in it. Just gleeful, wonderful splatter fun. Oh, what a great one. Peter Jackson used to make weird, gory stuff, and then he made The Lord of the Rings and Beatles movies. Oh, what a guy.
What amazes me about him, and I thought this when I was watching Brain Dead, was that he made Heavenly Creatures. I wasn't even thinking of Lord of the Rings. I was thinking about how you haven't seen Heavenly Creatures?
No, I still have not. I need to.
Is that what you're saying?
Oh,
Stephen, it's so good. Yeah, and it's so well crafted. You're I know, a fan of craftsmanship. Like, you find that very soothing. You will love it. Yeah, it's dark and disturbing, but very, very serious. So that's what I thought of when I was watching that. And then these are just so not my types of movies that I find them just impossible entries almost. But they're like just sabotaging your senses to such an extent, that they just can't be ignored.
I do like that. I do like an overwhelming experience. As I'm a person that can get overstimulated quite easily, I do like films that purposely, combatively overstimulate and just like go for it. I like an uncomfortable movie. I was talking to some people yesterday, like, why would you like that? Like, there is something about the cinema of discomfort. I was talking about Color Out of Space with a friend yesterday, and it was like, there's this weird noise, and I'm like, yeah, the weird noise is cool. It's just this weird abrasive noise. I like a weird abrasive noise. But to go what you're saying about these being like hard entry films, I think why this is comforting is in the same way that this is about a society and secret societies, etc. There is a secret or not so secret society of just like horror lovers and gore hounds that you recognize your people that just love this stuff. And I'm definitely one of those. And like, if you're on this in this tank, if you just love gore movies, there is something so basely satisfying about them. And this one just feels like have you seen this one? It's absolutely wild. It has some things you'll never unsee, and it's absolutely brilliant. There is just, I was talking about comfort films after this podcast with some friends yesterday, and people mentioned quite conventionally comforting things. And then my friend said, I'd pick Scream. I'm like, yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, this idea of the known generic language of horror, when you know what it's going to do, you know the tools it's playing with, you've seen the movie before, the tropes are known to you. There is something so satisfying about those effective tropes being pulled off in that genre playground that you know, and it's there and it's satisfying.
It's almost like you're the way that you describe it is almost like going to a family reunion. And like just recognizing people who love you and who you like want to hang around, and like just finding the family member that's kind of like the kooky uncle that you can just chat about things with easily. It's like there's this hominess to your descriptors that I think maybe helps elucidate your crazed, deranged reasoning for having this on your list.
I do generally find it comforting though, because there is a degree of craft to it when it gets to the explosion of absolute violence. That you're like, this is just so unbelievably well done and creative and expressive, and it is fun. I find it really, really fun. But the low stakes, chill out nonsense of it, the ridiculous late 80s of it all, just the high camp of it all that is not affected, not trying to be what it's not, is so naturally all of those things. It is a joyful experience to me. And it's also a film that has... So I first watched it when I was living in a different part of the country to my now wife, and I was like, once a month, I'd like get a long train journey up to go see her because she's working elsewhere, and I'd bring the iPad and just like rent some movies. And I just went for a phase of just trying to find weird gore trash. And this was the one that stood out the most, of being like, wow, this is absolutely wild. And that led to me and like-minded friends from university. We weren't at university, but like friends that I met there. I started hosting for them an annual gore fest. I would pick 3 movies, they'd all come around my house, we'd watch 3 ridiculous body horror films. I'd introduce at the beginning. It got happened for a few years. Society was one of the first movies we watched, and it really was like, this is what this is about. Let's just sit, have fun. You can kind of talk through it because it's ridiculous. And at the end, you're like, oh my God, what was that? What more can you want?
Well, and you have such a precious nostalgia for this too. Listening to you talk about it is such a joy, because it's like I can feel that not only is it just special to you, but it holds so many positive memories and so much like this time and this place, but then also that it transcends that even too. Because I mean, if you guys check out Stephen on Letterboxd, he has written like an academic level, thoughtful review of this with footnotes, a 5-star review, okay? Which I don't know if you would find anywhere else. So
it's damn movie. It's real good.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where sometimes
so Society. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, just to go back to the 5-star thing, it's just like I never want to view films as mathematical, as in like they need to be like, oh, but this has this problem in it. It's like, it's not about subtracting. It's about, for me, Society is a 5-star experience. I have such a great time with it. It tickles me cerebrally. It's viscerally entertaining. So yeah, I can find, but you can find flaws in anything. There are things in Society that are objectionable and that are bad. But as an experience of a film, it's not maths. It's not an equation. I don't need to balance it out. It's a damn 5-star experience, and I have a great time with it.
Okay, this is the greatest pitch of any film I think I've ever heard from someone. So you get the award of like persuasion. Passion meets persuasion. So everybody, I would normally not say this, but you should really watch it just based on the quality of Stephen's analysis. Please,
you also
just
might
check it out.
Discover that you love it. That's the thing. You might absolutely hate it, and that's fine. And I can see why you would. It's grotesque, but for the right kind of sicko, you watch that and go, oh yeah, that's me. This is the kind of thing that I like. And it's one of those movies that may unlock something in you.
Yes, and then you can thrust it upon an innocent person like myself, who now can never unsee the end of that film and is forever plagued by its stickiness. Okay, so we're going to move on now to things, yes, that I find comforting. The next one is Faces, Places, which is from 2017, directed by the lovely and wonderful Agnes Varda and JR. Do you refer to him as JR, right?
Yeah.
JR.
I brought a prop for this, so there you go. That's just...
Oh, I'm ready. For those of you not watching, Stephen now has sunglasses on because
I realised I'm watching the film that my sunglasses are almost the same as JR's sunglasses, and he only ever wears them. So therefore, for this talk about Faces, Places, I will wear these sunglasses and only take them off at the end, and you can blur my face. Please don't do that. But...
Okay, then. Okay, you're going to keep it on for the duration of this segment, is what you're telling me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So Agnes is somewhat perturbed and annoyed at JR for the duration of the film that he refuses to take his sunglasses off, and it will be up to you to rent the movie and see if he ever does so.
Which is itself a reflective comment on Jean-Luc Godard, who, so she obviously part of the Nouvelle Vague movement with Jean-Luc Godard, a friend of his, closer at points than at other points, and GLG himself. We just passed the 1-year anniversary of his death. It was just like a few days ago. Just a real loss of cinema.
Yeah.
But yeah, he very famously wore his dark sunglasses, never took them off, and they show a short film in this film that Agnes Varda made with him and Anna Karenina. Anna Karenina? Oh God, I'm forgetting names.
Yes.
Man. Yeah. That has him with his glasses and him without his glasses.
It's very appropriate. It makes me think immediately of Carpenter's They Live, what's the other one that where it's the person's wearing shades the entire time and it makes me want to wear shades?
I was going to say the Blues Brothers,
there's
but
another
I'm sure
film
you
where...
don't mean the Blues Brothers.
No. It's something more of a classic. I'll have to think on this. and then circle
More
back.
of a classic.
But okay, tell us what Faces Places. No,
Places.
no, it's definitely not that. Faces Places, yes. So tell us, set this up. It's a documentary, and what's it about, Stephen?
So Agnes Varda, arguably one of the progenitors of the new wave. Some see her first film as the first film of that movement, and she came to define it and move beyond it. But also known as a documentary filmmaker as much as she is as a director of feature films. This is not my favorite documentary of hers. I think that The Gleaners and I is just one of the greatest documentaries ever. But because of what that film is about, though I find it really uplifting and lovely, but because it is about poverty in very serious ways, it felt inappropriate to use it as a comfort film. So I wasn't going to go into that. So Faces Places is there in its stead, right. Really. So she teams up with photographer and muralist JR, a French visual artist. Agnes Varda herself, being a visual artist beyond just a director, does her own installation art that is really absolutely brilliant. If you've seen her wider filmography, some of it dabbles into that. The idea is based on her earlier film Murmurs, which is an absolutely fabulous film about the murals in Los Angeles that she came across while living there when Jacques Demy was making his Hollywood films, because they were married. Taking the idea of muralism and to go round the villages, the towns of France, and to take pictures of people and to put people onto places to show that places are people, and this like anthropological, sociological portrait of France, humanity. If you've seen an Agnes Varda film, she is curious and she is empathetic and she is humanist, and this is that as a documentary, just them being quirky, interviewing local people, finding out about local communities, and putting faces on places. Wonderful film.
Yeah. Wonderful film. I have often said this before I even met Stephen, but like I feel so much of a sense of like Ebert, Siskel and Ebert with the two of us, where it's just like you have these little blurbs, and then you're like, like it's like, well, you said it just perfectly. I mean, it's so compact the way that you think about things, which I find is so fascinating. It's like, oh, okay, like Stephen had a point here, and then he had a point here, and he just like perfectly succinctly just pitch things. You're a great pitcher, Stephen, I must say.
Okay.
Listening to you talk is just it's just well rounded. Yeah. So, okay. So obviously this is it's a film that I think a lot of people would find comforting just by the sheer nature of the technicality of it, like the score, the flow. It's kind of a road trip vibe. It's kind of a hangout vibe. And you were talking about too, like, the artistry. I think you mentioned this to me when we were talking in the mic check, like about your wife and how the art part of it goes into it.
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
So my wife is towards the tail end now. It's going to get paused because she's going to go on maternity leave for several months, but she is towards the tail end of a PhD done through, done for a university, which I will not mention because I don't want to just like dox people. But done in partnership with English Heritage, which people have heard of the National Trust, maybe outside of the UK. English Heritage is a similar organisation that owns and maintains properties and historic land throughout the country. And what her PhD is in graffiti, specifically at English Heritage sites, but also about like the philosophy and ideology of graffiti in general. What does it mean to make marks through time? What can we learn from marks through time? And this kind of central idea of, is there a worth to graffiti? Because a thing that she tackles a lot is these heritage sites have graffiti on their sites and they treat it as historically valuable. Yet if you were to graffiti a site, that would be seen as defacement. So why do we see some marks as being valuable and some marks as being criminal? And what does that say about how we treat heritage when something becomes heritage? And then why have people wanted to scribble on places for a long time? Because they have wanted to scribble places for a long time. To speak pictorially before we were even speaking verbally, and to leave a mark. It's kind of interesting, this idea that she's touched on in her writing of people used to go to Stonehenge and mark the stones as I was here, and now we go there and we take selfies because that is the way of saying that I was here. So this needs to mark out a point in time. And this film captures that idea of it is nice to leave a reminder that we were here and that we did something. And the film is about mortality in a way that could be so depressing, but it's very, very uplifting, of Agnes Varda realizing that she is old and that she's going to die soon. She did die quite soon after this, a couple of years after. And the film is either directly or for its status as one film in a great filmography, leaving things behind that will be enjoyed by others and that we existed and that we mattered. And so much of the wall art is people from the past or important figures in the community who are put up on places. But one great point about it, and this is why I think it's actually even more comforting for me, because it's not just glossing over. There's a lovely point where they put a mirror up to a lady and she doesn't like it. It makes her uncomfortable. And the fact that it takes the time to be self-reflective in that way, to realize that it is imperfect and there can be something off-putting about what it's doing, it makes it feel more human and more willing to present its faults. And I like the things that are imperfect as opposed to just like glossy and silly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was going to point out also the most powerful scene to me was the one where they go to a beach and there's this massive, what would you even call that? It's like it was like left over from a war or something, like just a gigantic structure in the middle of the beach. And she wants to put this image of one of the models that she used a lot when he was younger on the side of it. And she's sort of reminiscing about how she almost remembers the photographs that she took of this person more than she remembers anything about him, which in itself is an interesting idea. But then they put it by the ocean, so it literally, like, they do all this work and then it gets eliminated, it gets washed away, and the next day it's gone. So that was a very poignant point of her and JR just sort of talking about the transitory nature of life. And you know,
I think ephemerality is really important, and I know my wife's writing deals with that a lot, because graffiti is by its nature and wall art is by its nature ephemeral. You look at the stickers they're putting up and you're like, that's not going to be there for very long, either in the grand scale or it's going to get taken down at some point. And it's the doing things because they are worth doing, or the embracing that things aren't going to last forever. Which is interesting because Agnes Varda, in her art, she was someone, if you've seen her wider documentaries, they're really, really interesting. So there's the beaches of Agnes, which goes back to your beaches point. Beaches are really important to her. But in that film, or I forget if it's in Varda by Agnes, she talks about her work in plastic and how she loved the idea of plastic and what it could do, and then learning that plastic is this dangerous, toxic material. They did not realize at the time of making art of it. So there is that ecological element to this as well, and that it is important that things are ephemeral at points, because the things that try not to be ephemeral will be deeply damaging. It is good that things get washed away and that things are done. But then it being a film, though it gets washed away, the thing is captured in the film and you can watch it forever and it will always be there.
Exactly. And I think it also makes the point that a lot of things that we do are for ourselves. Like, just because you do something a moment in time and there isn't sort of proof that it happened, it can be cathartic for you or necessary for you, because a lot of times we think, like, what does it matter? No one's going to see this. You know, it matters in your own edification and your own personal growth journey, what have you. That things could have intrinsic value, even if they only affect you, or even if they only live on in your memory, I think is important, because we're so obsessed, can be so obsessed with that external validation to such a point that we hesitate to even do something that could just only matter to me or you.
I think that's perfectly put, and I think that's a really important notion for the film to deal with, and does deal with, but it's all part of this very open-hearted expression. I've seen all of Varda's films because she's my favorite filmmaker, definitely. And her filmography is just so curious, so innately curious, and has this warm-hearted approach to humanity. And this coming at the tail end of this like mammoth, brilliant filmography is just such a great way of being like, that's Agnes Varda. She was absolutely brilliant. She will not be forgotten. She is one of the highlights of cinema. And she just had so much to give and cares more about giving. All of her films are about herself, even her non-documentary, but some don't like her documentaries because she makes herself the focus as much as the focus itself. But I just love that stuff because I find her so interesting, and she is such a joy to watch on screen.
Yeah, this movie, honestly, the best way that I could describe it is it feels like a hug.
Yeah, totally,
like
completely.
You feel like you're being embraced by somebody just by watching them be embracing towards others. So, yet again, Stephen, you are just wonderfully convincing. So check out Faces Places, Stephen's second comfort film. The third one is you can remove your glasses now so we can see you. The third film is an absolute joy, and a 5-star film for me. So this was a rewatch. Yes. Stop Making Sense from 1984, directed by Jonathan Demme. Stephen, tell us about your recent experience and why you chose this as opposed to what you were originally going to go with.
Yeah, I was going to go for Sullivan's Travels because I love Preston Sturges, and like a thing that I love. I like screwball comedy in general, and I find verbose wittiness like a comforting mode. And I was half tempted by like even like noir film for a while. It's like something like The Long Goodbye, because there is something just wonderfully kind of warm bath of a film, which goes back to the horror love of, you know what's going on, you know the genre and the tropes, and it's just playing so competently in this space with enough subversion to work. So it was going to be that kind of conversation. But then Stop Making Sense was reissued with at least one of the band members of Talking Heads involved. But A24 are the company that have the rights to it and did a rescan that they rescanned for IMAX. And there was a special presentation of it as part of the Toronto International Film Festival, which was live streamed around the world. Or, if you're in the UK like I am, was streamed the day afterwards, though said that it was live the whole way through. I'm like, this is not live. I know it's not live. I had friends that saw this yesterday. And it also says on the T-shirt that you keep branding me, the day before today. So that was really strange. But hey, so I went to an IMAX cinema in a place I would not, a part of the world I don't like very much, a horrible shopping centre near me, which is a disgusting place. Avoid the Trafford Centre in Manchester, horrible place. But worth it to go see Awful. Stop Making Sense in IMAX. And the experience of updated sound, looks great visually, there in front of your face, really receptive audience, because, you know, if you're paying novelty prices to go see Stop Making Sense, you are there to see Stop Making Sense. And this pretty packed out, very varied in age, was wonderful, a little younger than myself, a little older than myself, just there to just enjoy filmmaking. And not just Talking Heads fans, because I love Talking Heads, my favourite bands. But even if you don't love Talking Heads, this is a great piece of cinema, which is what elevates it beyond most concert films. But you do have to like the music, obviously, because it is 90 minutes of their music, so it does help.
Yeah, it I think it helps, but it also is so immersive, and there is so much going on visually that I feel like you can almost get swept away in just the splendor of the whole thing. The exuberance, the passion that's demonstrated, the energy itself. It really is a very special experience. And I was just sitting here in my living room. I mean, I'm not there, but it really gets you like feeling pumped. I mean, Ebert like described it as, it's a concert film, but it also somewhat feels like a Jane Fonda workout video. Like, where like people seem to be working out, like literally, like there is this sense of just like nonstop movement to it. That's really fun.
Oh yeah, this is an expanded lineup, so it's the four of them with wider musicians who feel as much a part of the band as anyone else, just all at the absolute apex of their game, doing a show that they have done and know so well. So it was filmed over 3 shows with 6 cameras each night. So that's 18 cameras. So that's like 18 possibilities. And they knew the show so well. There was also a assistant director, I forget the name of, so I should know, but she literally mapped out every single like camera movement. of this is where the camera is at this point, this point, this point, this point, this point, over those three things. They knew exactly what they had. And then in the cutting room, when they're putting it together, it's so brilliantly edited. It's that.
Wow.
So David Byrne in the Q&A afterwards, which was a not very good Q&A, but well, that's not time for that conversation. But he was saying this point of they weren't taking over the cut. They were saying, oh, just so you know, in the show, Jerry's doing an amazing thing over there. If you've captured that, get that. They're like, oh no, we have got that. We've got that here and here and here. And it's just this brilliant, so well planned out stage show that Demi saw several times. He was supposed to be more engaged with it than he was because he was making another film at the time that overlapped. So he had to go back and do a lot of reshoots for that film because the star of the film was not happy with that film. So he got torn away from it for quite a bit. But they know the stage show. There are cameras in interesting places. And David Byrne himself talked about how they wanted to make a film because they felt that the show had a beginning, a middle, and an end. That it was as much of a stage show as it was a concert. And therefore it would work narratively. And what Demi brings to it is he brings a progression of filmmaking that matches that. So at the beginning, it is as stripped back and sparsely cinematic as the stage. The stage builds up. So it's just lots of like lingering, just fixed camera angles. And you're either up close or really far away. And then the filmmaking just like descends as the concert gets more and more fun. So towards the end, it's these wonderful whip pans across, going back and forth as it gets more energetic, and like right up in faces. It's like wonderful, like chiaroscuro lighting as it overtakes, and it gets like so black and shadowy. It's almost like John Cassavetes' Killing of a Chinese Bookie at the end, where it's just these cameras like spinning around and capturing this wonderful rawness that would not work the whole way through, but it has this cinematic escalation. There's just the filmmaking is as proficient and wonderful as the music is just so damn good. And it's just, we're talking off recording about this, it's just competence porn. It's just, everyone is so damn good at what they're doing.
Yes.
And that is a comforting mode of, this is just so good.
Yes, and it also has this sense to me of like, what you said, I mean, everybody being at the top of their game, but also like this peak quality. Like, you're literally witnessing the best version of everybody's self. Like, if you could like, if everybody was just able to access like what is the most authentic version of me, the one that is the most whole, integrated, like, but then like individually as well as collectively, like everyone just sort of bringing their A game together into like this symphony of an execution that just makes you feel really good yourself, even though you're completely removed from it. It somehow brings out that happiness in you too. So it's just absolutely enjoyable from that standpoint.
It's filmed so differently to a conventional concert film, because I think conventional concert films want to give the experience of going to see the band in concert. It's like, well, you couldn't go see it, so here is the show for you. And in the same way that the best stage adaptations are those that realize that cinema has things to offer that a stage show does not. So theatrical adaptations are better when they take advantage of cinematic flourishes rather than just, we filmed the stage show. Films of stage shows are not very good unless you're just there because it's a live theatre streaming. So this so often places the camera on the stage as if you are there on the stage and ignores you as like an observer. It is like they are characters in a film. And I think that I love that it captures the things that you would not see unless the camera's there. The little glances between them, the little like checks to be like, you can see them cueing each other in. You can see the crew off the side just like bobbing along. It's all these little micro gestures that you would never see, but the camera can bring out. And Demi and the crew know that the camera can add to this show, as opposed to, because you can just go to the show at that time. Like, that's a show that you can see. And that's a different experience. This is the film experience. It's not trying to translate the stage experience.
That's also an excellent point, because Ebert was talking about this too, which I think is very valid, it was also just a wise choice creatively not to focus on the audience at all.
Yeah.
Like he was saying how they don't cut away to just audience members singing or, tapping their feet or whatnot. We're not distracted at all by just, that we're seeing this random person who probably is not going to be at the moment we're witnessing anyway. So there is a lack of artifice, which I know that you appreciate, is that it's trying to preserve the realness of something, and then also enable us or allow us in to see those sort of special moments that were shared just between two people, that they don't necessarily know is being caught. So there's this candid camera aspect as well that's really precious.
Totally. And then when it gets to the end and we do see a bit of the audience at the end, that becomes so much more of a cathartic moment of being like, you feel like you've been through something with them, that you are one of those audience members in a different way. And there's also that great lady that does that kind of like thing of her head that just absolutely is amazing. There's just these like so happy, wonderful people in the crowd that you get as a reward of watching the thing, and it makes it feel like that you've experienced something. It just knows exactly what to put in and when. It just is so brilliantly this moment for that. And I'm going to over about David Byrne. It was a shame because everyone is brilliant, but David Byrne is just a leading man here. It is such a brilliant cinema performance. And I kept thinking of Buster Keaton specifically. It is this straight-faced, playing his body as an instrument, master of physical comedy, of the way that he can move himself around and manipulate himself around, is just brilliant to watch and is funny. It is a funny film of just these moments of pure artistic performative comedy.
Yeah, what sold me on it the first time that I saw it, where I was like, this is 5 stars, which is an unusual thing for me to sort of come to, was the lamp. The part where he is just like basically dancing with a lamp stand, or a lamp on a stand.
Pushing over and catching it, pushing over and catching it.
Yeah. There's this sort of like curiosity and novelty about life that is like inviting us to see objects in a different way, as well as just get inside his headspace for an hour and 23 minutes, because you really feel like, as much as it is a group effort, this is the product of a certain very specific person's creative vision. And in addition to Jonathan Demme's, it's like Byrne, like, if you can get inside his mental space, this is what he loves. This is how he sees things. And then in addition to the visuals, you hear his words, the lyrics too, that are just so quirky and challenging and wordy, and, kind of like a screwball comedy in a way. I was thinking like you were talking about Sullivan's Travels, but this is very talky music.
Yeah, Talking Heads songs are funny. Like he is just slippery, wonderful phrases and just silly things and lines that echo, and just like even like their conventional love songs, like This Must Be the Place, just has like so many lines in it that just like got a face with a view is just a wonderful line of being like, oh, that's Talking Heads right now. You've got a face with a view. Like, I know exactly what that means. What a weird way of saying that, but I know exactly what that means. And also in an earlier song there is the immortal line, our president's crazy, have you heard what he said, which is a line that is only ever resonant, and it resonates for years and years and years and years and years.
Well, and before we recorded, yes, which we will not get into right now, Stephen, but is apt. One of the songs that I was listening to prior to recording was this song that he wrote about. It was in American Utopia, but about his apartment building, and like how much he just loves to live there, and how it makes his life so convenient. And and I just love that song. And I find that very comforting, of just somebody talking about, again, ordinary things in such a unique way that you are soothed by his perspective in a way. So,
have you seen the movie he directed? Have you seen True Stories?
I haven't. I need to now.
Really fun. It's really, really fun. It is what you expect a David Byrne directed, and I like the album because it is a Talking Heads album. It's not their best album. It is because this concert comes after Speaking in Tongues, which is like the last great Talking Heads album, and I would say it's not as good as the albums before it even. So it's like there's the earlier absolutely brilliant stuff. Remain in Light is my favourite album of theirs, but that run up to Remain in Light is just absolute perfection. And then Talking in Tongues is not as brilliant, but still brilliant. And then after that, you do have a kind of like David Byrne instigated explosion of Talking Heads as he becomes way too controlling and domineering. It becomes David Byrne's show. And so this is basically as good as it ever gets. And this is the band at their apex. And the fall you're not going to see because it happens after the movies. This is just, bam, apotheosis, talking heads, let's do this.
Okay, so and True Stories is like, he's like going into a town and talking about like
it's good. It's fun. It's fun.
What is it exactly? I know that generally speaking what it is.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but it is just a fun trip inside David Byrne's head as he just talks like this the whole time. Welcome to I Like Cities. What about cities? What do you think about? And it's just a fun time to just be along with David Byrne, and music happens every now and then, and it's just wild and silly.
He was also on John Mulaney had a special on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it about the Sack Bunch lunch.
I've heard of it.
Okay. He's in that quite a bit, and it's really, really fun what he does there. But he's just like a silly man kind of, but like very contained when he's very serious when he's talking, but you know that he's like just got like this edge to him. Just a fascinating individual.
He's great. There is, of course, unfortunately, if you have watched any of the things around Stop Making Sense, there is a promotional video for Stop Making Sense that was made at the time, which does have some concept warning for racism, some David Byrne blackface in it, so that's not good. He has talked about that, and has talked about how completely unacceptable, should not a thing that I've done. So judge David Byrne as you wish by that. Just know that he has talked about that. I'm not saying that makes it okay, but I also feel when talking about David Byrne, one must mention that point. That's a thing that existed before it was okay and put out as a promo.
Kind of icky. Well, to completely veer in another direction before we end here, Stephen, I want you to mention your dog chasing sausage. Please mention what you were going to present to me as something that you had to mention on this, because everybody needs to see it, and I will put the link on my letterbox when I post this.
It's awesome. So my real comfort films, because I'm not much of a film rewatcher, but a thing that I rewatch all the time are just early shorts, just silent shorts. I watch so much of them. There's a few that I go back to all the time. There's the Méliès, the three troubling heads, which I watch all the time because it's just great, and I like showing that to people, just like heads bopping around all over the place. But this Alice Guy Blaché, or Guy Blaché, I forget how it is said. She is one of the most important, interesting filmmakers of all time, from a time when film was predominantly female. This is me being very, very brief over film history, but the beginnings of film, because film was not seen as an art form that was credible. It was, therefore, and we'll get to what that means, in terms of directors, quite female-dominated. And you've got Alice Guy Blaché just making so much absolutely brilliant creative stuff. And then when film started to become a business, they decided that business is for men. And women were very much like pushed out of the film industry. And when it was seen as a thing that was an industry and made money, then therefore men took over. There's a great statistic in a book I got back here, which is a really good book, actually. Women versus Hollywood, which is a great book. Really fun, really nicely written as well, really fun. And it talks about like 1917, I think, versus like 2017, about how there was so many films directed by women in 1917 by Universal, and I think in 2017 there was one. So there was this idea that people like to talk about there are more films by women nowadays, and there are, than previously, but a long time ago there were way more, because it's like women started this industry fundamentally, and made it what it was, and then were pushed out because men got involved with money. So she's so important and is so brilliant, and I love these silent shorts because they are just pure filmmaking, pure fun, pure wonderfulness, and the race for the sausage is just, I couldn't pick this as my film because I couldn't just pick a 4-minute film and just like lose a slot, but I so wanted to talk about it anyway, because it is just inventing screwball, weirdness, chaos. It's like What's Up, Doc, the Bogdanovich movie, of like that wild chase in that, but so much early. And I love that stuff so much. Just pure, silly, joyful chaos of, that classic comedy trope, if I walk out with glass panel and someone goes through it. It's just 4 minutes of different versions of that, basically, of how can one dog run through a town and cause as much chaos as possible. Really snappily put together, really energetic, really fun, like really brilliantly blocked out, especially considering what they were working with in some of the cinematic equipment. So it is so impressive, and it's just very silly and very fun, and it just delights me so much every time I watch it. I watch it really frequently because it's just so fun.
Yes, I will definitely be sharing this with everyone I know, and you should take time out of your day just to get a sense of Stephen's just unbridled happiness at watching things just completely fall apart, and then being like, okay, I can kind of go back to my day of normalcy. But yeah, I think that I couldn't go without mentioning at least this 4-minute thing that you actually would have wanted to be one of your comfort films. It's just hilarious to me. And I am just utterly convinced that you should have been a salesman of some kind. Because it's just the way that you phrase things. It's like, oh my gosh, I just have to watch this right now.
It's only 4 minutes,
I appreciate that about you, Stephen. Yeah, for 4 minutes. Yeah. So to wrap up, Stephen's comfort films, which you shall find comforting too. Society, Faces, Places, and The Great Stop Making Sense. We'll add on Sullivan's Travels by Sturgis and what is it called? Race?
The Race for the Sausage.
The Race the Race for the
Which is a translated title anyway, so like you'll find it by different things in different places because it's French in it, but it's good.
Yeah, it's good. And then Stephen, was there one thing that you wanted to conclude about your pod before we say goodbye?
So thank you for listening, and thank you again for inviting me on. This is a great thing that you do here, and it's a pleasure to be a part of it. But yeah, if you've enjoyed me rambling and talking a lot, then you can get a lot of that elsewhere. Find me on Letterboxd, which is where you see most of my writing, where I'm on that blue sky. I'm all about that blue sky. Find me on Blue Sky. I'm on Blue Sky. I don't know what I'm calling it, though. It's a great question. Maybe you can't find me on Blue Sky, but look for me. I don't know what my name is. But yeah, and the Stacks podcast, where myself and Jack talk a lot about films, bad films, good films, filmographies, and we try and get guests on every now and then. We'll have to get you on at some point, but scheduling, as you know, is a difficult thing.
Yes, I know. And I was going to say, at some point, I would love to be on Stephen's and Jack's pod and discuss whatever they would like me to. I'm all about it.
Anything will be an absolute joy.
Oh my gosh. Well, not anything, because now I know that your capacity for goo. So I should probably tread lightly in my willingness department. But it's good to expand one's horizons every now and then. So, Stephen, a pleasure. And we'll see you guys at the movies.